For centuries, ancient Israel operated as a traditional territorial state. Their national identity was bound entirely to physical borders and the lineage of a physical king sitting on a throne. At the center of this worldview stood the Jerusalem Temple. It functioned as the literal, spatial dwelling place of their God, serving as the physical anchor for their entire religious and cultural reality. In 586 BCE, that physical anchor was annihilated. The Babylonian Empire besieged Jerusalem, breached the walls, and burned Solomon's temple to the ground. Following the destruction, the Babylonian army forcibly marched Israel's political, intellectual, and religious elite hundreds of miles east into captivity. In the ancient Near East, military defeat carried a specific theological meaning. If your city fell and your temple was destroyed, the accepted logic dictated that your local god had been overpowered by the conqueror's deity. The exiles now faced terrifying questions. They had to consider whether Yahweh had been defeated by the Babylonian god Marduk, and whether total assimilation into Babylonian culture was inevitable. Stripped of their land, their king, and their sanctuary, the captive Israelites required a survival mechanism to maintain their identity without a physical homeland. The response to this crisis fell to a group known as the priestly scribes, or redactors. Living in exile, they took on the task of compiling and editing their people's scattered oral traditions and historical writings. They were working with older materials, like the Yahwist tradition, which painted a highly localized, earthy portrait of a deity who walked in gardens and literally molded humanity from soil. The priestly scribes addressed the destruction of the Jerusalem temple by reconceptualizing the opening account of creation in Genesis 1. Instead of a localized deity, they described a sovereign voice ordering formlessness into structure, framing the universe as a cosmic sanctuary. If creation itself is a temple, the divine presence isn't trapped beneath Canaan's rubble, it's fully accessible in Babylon. Because traditional animal sacrifices required a physical altar in Jerusalem, the scribes elevated non-spatial markers. They emphasized the covenant of circumcision and anchored Sabbath rest directly into the cosmic rhythm of creation. By prioritizing these portable practices within a universal cosmic temple, the redactors provided a way for exiles to engage their God anywhere on earth. The captive Israelites lived in the shadows of massive imperial architecture, surrounded by glazed brick walls and towering monuments designed to project absolute power. Against this backdrop, the Genesis creation account functions as sharp political satire. While Babylonian myths claimed the world was born from violent slaughter, Genesis countered with a God who speaks peaceful order into existence. Imperial propaganda dictated that humans were created as menial slaves to relieve the gods of hard labor. Genesis elevated universal human dignity by declaring all humans are created as royal stewards in the image of God. The text directly lampoons Babylonian monument building in the story of the Tower of Babel. It reframes the empire's proud ziggurats, claimed to be gateways to the gods, as monuments to human hubris and linguistic confusion. To structure this counter-narrative, the scribes utilized a system called the Toledat. They divided the book of Genesis using 10 precise genealogical headings. These headings operate as a narrative funnel, beginning with the entire cosmos, then pruning collateral branches to focus exclusively on Jacob's 12 sons. This structure took scattered rival tribes in exile and wove them into a single biological family. By recording this unbroken lineage, the Toledat provided a fractured people with a permanent ancestral claim to their land, defying imperial erasure of their heritage. Genesis functions as a deliberate ethio-national charter. It established the foundational identity of the Israelites. It provided the answer to who they were as a unified people, the geographical boundaries of where they belonged, and the narrative of why they were chosen. This charter laid the necessary groundwork for the Book of Exodus. By documenting a multi-generational history of promises to the patriarchs, Genesis built the historical trust required to make the strict legal codes of Mount Sinai binding on the community. This transition continues in Exodus, where the priestly scribes dedicated vast sections of text to the design of the tabernacle. They wanted to convey a specific theological message to a displaced people. God's throne travels on wheels, pitching its tent wherever they wander. The Babylonian exile altered the mechanics of Israel's survival. A nation that entered captivity as a territorial state, dependent on a king and a temple, emerged as a resilient covenantal community. Their final survival mechanism was anchoring their national identity, their history, and their theology entirely within a written text. By engineering a portable homeland out of scriptural architecture, the redactors of Genesis allowed a displaced people to survive the erasure of their physical borders and maintain their culture for the millennia that followed.